All right. I hope that everyone is doing great with our work right here and everybody is having a easy and a good time with trying to make sure they understand everything. And if you have any questions, please again, let someone know, let your teachers know. We have contact information, we have everything you need. Watch the videos, take notes, treat it like you're actually inside the school building. What I want to do is actually go through what kind of review what we've been through, which is viruses this week. So let's kind of go through the lesson review for this chapter. So 21.1, that's the chapter 21, lesson 1, viruses. A typical virus is composed of a core of DNA or RNA surrounded by a protein coat. Viruses can reproduce only by infecting living cells. In a lytic infection, a virus enters a cell, makes copies of itself, and causes the cell to burst. In a lysogenic infection, a virus integrates its DNA into the DNA of the host cell. And when we say integrates, that means that it actually becomes part of it and inserts itself into the DNA. After it does that to the host cell, the viral genetic information replicates along with the host cell's DNA. So when the host cell DNA replicates, the viral DNA replicates. Viruses can cause disease by directly destroying living cells or by affecting cellular processes in many ways that upset homeostasis. Despite the fact that they are not alive, viruses have many of the characteristics of living things. Let's quickly go through our vocabulary words. The first one was virus. We defined virus earlier on as a particle made of proteins, nucleic acids, and sometimes lipids that can replicate only by infecting living cells. The next word we have, capsid. A capsid is the protein coat surrounding a virus. The third word that we have is lytic infection. And right here above, we have a definition or we have an explanation for it. The definition that you guys received all the way up in the notes before now was a type of infection in which a virus enters a cell, makes copies of itself, and causes the cell to burst. Bacteriophage. This was also known as a bacterial virus. The definition was a kind of infection that infects bacteria. Your next word, lysogenic infection. Your lysogenic infection, from the vocabulary given to you earlier on, was defined as a type of infection in which the virus embeds its DNA into the DNA of the host cell and is replicated along with the host cell's DNA. You can also see that right here. It says it a little bit differently with a different word to it. However, they both mean the exact same thing. So when I say something integrates its DNA versus the virus integrates its DNA versus the virus embedding its DNA, both of those words in this instance are used as what we call synonyms. You guys should know that word from Mr. Newley or from Mr. Pigeon and Miss Heckman. All right, let's move along. Your next word, prophage. Prophage was your bacteriophage DNA that is embedded in the bacterial host DNA. And if we're looking here, we could also say that the prophage DNA is integrated, because we just said that that's a word that we're able to use in this situation, so that bacteriophage DNA embeds itself or integrates itself in the bacterial host DNA. Retrovirus. This is your last word for this lesson. The last one was a retrovirus is RNA virus that contains RNA as its genetic information. We learned that the retrovirus, we learned that the word retro actually meant backwards, and that it does things backwards with the genetic information. So instead of what we know, DNA makes RNA makes proteins, this retrovirus actually does things going from RNA to DNA. All right, so let's move on. If you have any questions, please watch the videos before, and you can also give me a call. You can shoot me an email. You can send me a message on Remind app. Let's review this photo. If we're looking at this photo, this is your picture. This is like a basic picture of the virus, right? So the basic picture of the virus has a few different parts to it. We talked about those different parts in earlier example we talked about those different parts in an earlier video. Now, with these different parts, let's see if we can label them. So I'm going to give you 4 words, and I want you to kind of look at it and see if you can figure out where they go. So the words I'm going to give you is DNA, head, tail fiber, and tail sheath. So take a few seconds while looking at this photo to see if you actually remember what part goes where. Again, those words are DNA, head, tail fiber, and tail sheath. So I'll give you about 20 seconds. As you're looking at the picture, if you don't know, start drawing it. Okay, that's about 20 seconds, guys. Seems quick, right? So let's actually label these different parts. Number 1 is the head. Number 2, number 1 right here. Number 1 is going to be the head. Number 2, this is going to be your tail sheath. This sheath is covering. I always used to think of it like sheet. It covers something, right? Like in a bed. Now, number 3. Number 3 is going to be, boom. This is going to be your genetic code. In this instance, we're calling it a DNA virus. So this is your DNA. Number 4 is going to be your tail fiber. These are the things that attach right, boom, on the outside, and then they connect to whatever cell they're trying to get into. All right, let's move to the next part. Let's also quickly review some of the different categories that were used to classify viruses. This was on your website for the Interactive Virus Explorer. You had different ways, such as using whether or not they have an envelope. What type of structure do they have? Is it DNA, RNA, single-stranded, double-stranded, positive or negative? Boom. All right, the host. What kind of host cells can they infect? The genome, type, transmission, and also whether or not they have a vaccine. So now that we have looked at these things, let's kind of go through some questions. You guys saw it. Oh man, it's okay. Number 1, it says, what do viruses depend on for their reproduction? Number 2, it says, describe each of the 2 pathways viruses may follow once they have entered a cell. Number 3, name 3 human diseases caused by viruses. Number 4, what characteristics of living things do viruses have? And number 5, how is viral reproduction different from that of cell-based organisms? Let's go to number 1. What do viruses depend on for reproduction? If you remember, we just talked about how viruses actually need living things. They need living cells because they are non-living particles. They cannot reproduce on their own. So viruses depend on living cells for their reproduction. And make sure you write these down in your notebooks. Number 2, describe each of the 2 pathways viruses may follow once they have entered a cell. So we talked about 2 different types of infections. We talked about a lytic infection and also a lysogenic infection. So once a virus enters a cell, it causes one of those 2 types. In a lytic infection, a virus enters a cell, it makes copies of itself and causes the cell to burst. In a lysogenic infection, a virus integrates or embeds itself in the DNA, its DNA, into the DNA of the host, and the viral genetic information replicates along with the host cell's DNA. Number 3, name 3 human diseases caused by viruses. If you think back to the chart that we were looking at, there were a few different things on there. I chose the easy ones that most people know right off the back of their hand. The common cold, the flu or influenza, and also AIDS. Number 4, what characteristics of living things do viruses have? So that also comes from the chart that we looked at in the last video. Viruses display characteristics of living things like they possess genetic material such as DNA and RNA. After they infect living cells, they can reproduce. They have a regulation of gene expression, and they can also evolve over time. All right, let's move on to number 5. How is viral reproduction different from that of cell-based organisms? So this is going to be a little bit more, right? Let's think about living things. Living things have cells that are living. They can reproduce on their own. Viruses cannot do that. So your viral reproduction can only occur within a host cell. That host cell has to be a living cell. That host cell is usually a part of a cell-based organism. Now, living cells are capable of independent cell division, either sexually, which is meiosis, or asexually, which would be mitosis. So, a virus or viral reproduction can only happen inside of a living cell. If you have any questions or you feel like some of these you were not able to do on your own from the notes that you took, go ahead and just review your stuff and give me a call or send a text message if you have any questions at all. Okay, now you get this. You're done. You finished your viruses part. You know I had to put Oprah in there and also an emoji. You know I love my emojis. Okay, thank you very much and good luck, everybody.